Ray, it's good to have you. First of all, maybe start with the whole idea of TPUs versus GPUs. What are some of the differences, and why do you think TPUs are gaining a bit more traction, or at least more talk these days?
You're absolutely right on the analysis. The reason TPUs are so important, these are tensor processing units. They're purpose-built for AI, for deep learning. This means training and inference. This means lower total costs. This means they're more power efficient than GPUs. And of course, these are things that Google has been working on for quite some time. And what we've seen over the course of the 7th generation of Google's TPUs is their ability to make them super efficient. Now, think you're Meta and you've got a supply chain diversification problem. You're only getting everything from Nvidia, and you need the ability to actually crank out training and learning and all the other things you need for reasoning for AI. And suddenly you're like, hey, where else can I go find chips? You can't do the regular chips. But Google's shown that they can do TPUs. And so the logical thing is to rent those TPUs from Google and Google Cloud.
And up until recently, people thought Alphabet was lagging behind in this whole AI race. But the fact that there has this whole, it's one of the few companies that have this so-called full stack when it comes to computing. Then, so what are the prospects? Is the sleeping giant finally making a big comeback now?
Well, we've been talking about how Google is ahead in AI for the last 18 months. And part of it is really because when Microsoft fired that shot saying they were ahead in AI, Google finally got its act together about 18 months ago. But they've been working on these chips for the last 5 years. So it's not something they just came up with over time, but they are fully vertically integrated, like you said, with the complete stack. We call it chip to app. And what that does is it gives them massive efficiencies of scale. If you think about having a fully vertically integrated iPhone, the advantages as opposed to getting components from different places, just like with the Mac. Now, as I said, over time, like you'll see, Google is leading the AI battle because it's not only diversifying income streams, it's taking all parts of the value chain and bringing it together back into search. Now, one of the things that we spend a lot of time thinking about is AI chip demand. And the question really is NVIDIA going to take a dent from TPUs from Google, or is it going to make a difference from AMD? And the short answer is there's $7 trillion market demand in AI chips by 2030. I mean, that's where we see the market in 2030. So we think there's so much demand to go around that this may be a time to buy the dip for NVIDIA or buy the dip in other places where you start to see some weakness.
Interesting. So there's plenty of demand out there, I guess you say. It's not really kind of a zero-sum game, right? Ray, as you highlighted, right? It's not like I choose between TPU or GPU. There's plenty to you can do both for a lot of these
you're definitely going to do both.
Yeah.
You're definitely going to do both. And part of the reason is you want to diversify your chip base. And part of that, part of that diversification strategy is if something works with CUDA and NVIDIA well, but something works better with TPUs, it's just the same reason that you diversify, whether you put your cloud in AWS or in Google or in Oracle or in Microsoft. It's the same reason. And people are also diversifying their chipsets because each of these chips are going to do something differently. And for example, you might use deep learning chips for training and inference with TPUs more than you're going to do with the GPUs that you're going to do for just training. And so each one is going to play a different role, especially in a mix for some of the advanced companies using AI.
Yeah, I mean, beyond just reports of Meta looking into TPUs, who else do you think would be adopting and seeing more of a wider adoption of these TPUs? Who else will be using them, you think, Ray?
I think every hyperscaler that doesn't feel like they're competing with Google will be looking at this as an example. So, for example, Oracle's probably going to look at these TPUs. I think, you might even see Microsoft and Amazon take a stab at it. Amazon has its own Trainium chip as well, so they're probably using that. But when we get down to the companies that are using it, pharmaceutical giants, energy companies doing exploration, governments using weather, people building sovereign AI, they want to be able to make sure that they're going to consistently get chips on time. They're going to want to be able to make sure they have a second choice or third choice in source. So you'll see AMD, you'll see Google play that role in terms of providing the alternative to the NVIDIA dominance.
What about when it comes to, of course, our large language model, the Gemini 3? How does it stack up with the likes of ChatGPT? Because there's been talk about it is one of the leading top tier sort of large language models out there. How do we see consumers? Are they getting more attractive to Gemini?
There's definitely a lot of attraction to Gemini because you get the full stack of Google, back to your point earlier. And we're seeing Gemini 3 beat out ChatGPT in a lot of instances and use cases. If you go to some of those LM leaderboards, you're starting to see that Gemini stacking up against Perplexity, Gemini stacking up against Claude, and you're seeing these head-to-head battles. And I think you're seeing it's going to come down to really your use case. General purpose, it'll still be Gemini, still be ChatGPT. You'll see Claude there, especially for software development. It's one of everyone's favorites. And then, of course, if you're looking for open source Chinese, open source LLMs, Gwen and DeepSeek are still leading the pack. We're seeing some great advantages there as well as people are looking at smaller language models and use cases.
What does this mean for some of the Asia sort of chip makers out there, right? I think Samsung is one of the key suppliers of Google's TPUs with their HBMs. Could they really start to catch up with the likes of SK Hynix in this space?
Well, it depends on the volumes, but you're definitely going to see that diversification. Some spreading the AI chip wealth around to some of the other vendors is going to happen. But the NVIDIA lead is definitely hard to beat. If you look at what's going on, even with TSMC making some chips in the US, they only get half the chips and then the rest are assembled in the US. I mean, there's something special about what's coming out of TSMC. And of course, the HBM high bandwidth memory that's coming out of SK Hynix and the other places, Hynix and some of the other places, because what we are seeing is, a massive demand for speed and massive demand for compute power.
Can you tell us more about what this, you mentioned that this doesn't really make a dent when it comes to NVIDIA, but the stock really has been taking a hit recently, right? Whether it's concerns about, this AI bubble. I think Michael Burry has led to a little bit of that, scrutinizing of these sort of deals and the like. I'm just wondering overall, how much more upside do you think NVIDIA does have moving forward?
Well, if we actually do some models, and some of our models, we basically see there's another $1 trillion in sovereign AI in market cap, and there's another $1 trillion in physical AI in market cap. So somewhere about 6.5 trillion, 7 trillion market cap is probably where we think NVIDIA is going to peak. And that's coming from basically the demand. As we start seeing that shift on sovereign AI, that's probably the thing you're going to be hearing about all year, from Davos all the way down to next year by CES. That's be sovereign AI deals, companies that are building data centers, physical AI. Those two things are going to drive the market and drive the headlines in 2026.